it's Shara from Woodshop Diaries, and let me introduce you to one of my biggest pet peeves of this house, the laundry room door. Now, I won't go into my whole spiel about my hatred of doors in houses, it's a thing. But this particular door is just extremely annoying. This is one of those swinging doors, so you can open it one way and you can open it the other way and it'll swing back in place, and if you push it open far enough, it'll stay in position. The only reason when we ever even use this door is to just keep things a little quieter when the washing machine and the dryer are running. Otherwise, we leave the door wide open. The problem with leaving the door open all the time is that if you open it this way, it's right in front of the door that we walk in and out of outside all the time. But if you open it all the way into the inside, the door opens into the washing machine, and I hate this door. It's going away. We're gonna have to get rid of it. So I hope you guys will join with me in the hatred of this door and build something better. Okay, so maybe I'm being a little dramatic about my feelings towards a door. It's really not that big of a deal, but in this case, I do think replacing the swing door with a sliding door is just a little more practical. So let's build this one. I've linked all of the tools and materials plus the plans in the description below, so you can check them out if you're interested in building your own. To start this project off, I began by building the door frame. I just wanted something simple, so I built the main frame of this door using 2x6s. I measured the door opening and added 4 inches to the width and about 2 inches to the height. That way it would just overhang the opening on all sides by 2 inches. This made my overall door size 40 inches wide and 82 inches tall. So I cut down my pieces to make this size. There were 2 long stiles and 8 shorter rails. Because these 2x6s came with rounded corners, I ran them through the table saw to remove just a little over a blade width on each edge. That left me with a nice clean, sharp corner to work with. But you could leave the edges as is if you don't have a table saw. It's really not that big of a deal. I dry fit the pieces together on my workbench and spaced the rails evenly so that all of the openings were the same size. Then I used a speed square and my Kreg multi-mark tool to mark out dowel locations to assemble the frame. I didn't really measure these exactly, I just used a square to mark 2 dowels on each rail and transfer these marks around the corners where they'll be drilled out. I made sure to mark these in the center of the board and labeled each rail so that I didn't get them mixed up. Then I used a 3/8 inch Forstner bit to drill out holes to insert the dowels. I just drilled a little over half the length of the dowels I was using, which ended up being about 3/4 of an inch deep. I sanded these pieces before assembling because it'll be a lot easier to do now versus later, but I made sure to keep everything in the same order and not to switch up the rails. And then the most stressful part of this entire build began, the glue up. In hindsight, pocket holes may have been a better option, but I really didn't want to see or plug these in this case, so I went with dowels. It's doable, just a little hectic. I used wood glue to install dowels into one of the stiles, then added the rails. I was careful not to use too much glue as I didn't want to have to clean up a ton of squeeze out in these openings, but to be honest, I could have stood to use a little more than I did. Oops. With the 8 rails in place, I glued dowels into the other stile and attempted to assemble this myself, but I ended up recruiting some help. I used a rubber mallet to tap in most of the dowels on one end of the door, but I used a pipe clamp to convince the others to go in place. I used several pipe clamps to glue up this door and let it dry overnight. After the glue was good and dry the next day, I came back and gave the door a good sanding to remove any squeeze out and smooth out all of the joints. Now, if you know me at all, you know that I'm extremely indecisive, so I actually started to stain this door and then I changed my mind and sanded it all off. To be honest, even now after this project is finished, I still can't decide if I like the color and I'm kind of debating on painting it, but that's a decision for another day. For now, I just applied some poly and started cutting down my plexiglass pieces to fill the openings in the door. You could use real glass for this, and I actually have used real glass on a similar door in the past, but for this, I just grabbed a sheet of 1/8" plexiglass to keep it lighter, simpler, and less dangerous in case of any accidents. I used a finish blade in my circular saw to cut down the sheet into 7 strips slightly smaller than the openings in the door. I gave these pieces several coats of frosted glass spray paint. Now, I've used this spray paint several times before and it works really great, but in my experience, you'll need at least 4 coats to make it look even and not still be see-through. I built a very similar door several years ago and I used a router to route out a rabbit to install the glass panels, but this time I was trying to find an alternative way to install this that didn't require a router, and I ended up using 1/2" square dowels. I cut these dowels to fit inside the openings of the door and stained them ebony to give them some contrast against the natural wood on the frame. Then I used some quick dry clear wood glue to glue these pieces in place. I kept them about 1/4 inch inset from the front edge and worked my way around each opening, gluing these in place. After each opening was lined with dowels, I laid the door over and glued the frosted glass panels in place. Glue here is totally optional. It's really not necessary because after these were in, I flipped the door back up and repeated the process of lining the other side of the door with dowels to hold the glass in place. I'll be honest, I couldn't decide if I liked the black lining, so on this side I kept these pieces natural. That way, if I changed my mind, I could flip the door over and make this the front. Again, this whole indecision thing, it's a struggle. At this point, the door itself was complete, but now I had to hang it. If you remember my rolling ladder library from a couple videos ago, I ordered a sliding door rail kit online for that. Well, I originally ordered a 14-foot rail for that and ended up using a 12-foot rail instead. So instead of sending back the 14-foot kit, I just kept it to use for other projects like this one. So this kit came with 2 7-foot bars to make it a full 14-foot. But for this, obviously, I just used one of the 2 bars. In order to mount this rail, I needed to either remove the door trim and finish the corners with drywall or extend this top board the full length of the rail. Since I hate drywall work, I just installed a new piece of trim here. The existing trim was never caulked or painted properly, so this gave me the opportunity to caulk, putty, and paint the trim so that it looks a little bit nicer. And then it was time to actually hang the rail. I followed the directions with the kit to mark and pre-drill holes into the wall studs behind the trim. I did 2 first just to get the rail in place, and then I did the rest one by one to make sure that my holes didn't get out of line with the holes on the rail. Now, the best part of the whole project, removing the old door. I'm just kidding. But this was actually a really satisfying part of the project to get rid of this old door and open up this space. It already felt like 10 times bigger. I puttied the holes left behind after removing the door, then sanded and did some paint touch-up. I headed back to the shop to finish up the new door. I laid the door over on its back and marked out where to drill the holes to install the rollers. The instructions tell you where to drill the holes, so I marked that and then I double-checked before I drilled anything, and it was a good thing. What? It said 1 9/16, 3 9/16. That is incorrect. Oh. Why wouldn't you give the... Okay. So that one's right. The instructions were correct, I just didn't read them right. Anyway, once I got that all sorted out, I drilled out these holes. I started small and worked my way up to a hole large enough to fit the included bolts through and installed the rollers good and tight. Then I carried the door inside and set it on the rail for the moment of truth. It fit, it rolled, and it functioned. That's a win in my book. I adjusted the stops on each end of the rail so that the door didn't slide off, but I didn't have any concrete screws to install the guide stops at the bottom of the door. So for now, it's just hanging freely. I've got so much more to do in this little hallway and in the laundry room, so the color of the door may change once I get everything else in here added and situated. I'm kind of debating on painting it black, but who knows. If you want to see what else eventually happens in this space, be sure to follow along and subscribe because there will be tons more house updates in the next several months and plenty more project ideas as well. I really hope you guys enjoyed this project and this video, and thank you so much for watching, friends. Until next time, happy building.